Hello everyone, welcome to Zaref Game Dev. In this video, we are going to create the prefabs for the player and attach it to the spawn manager, which when the game start event is called, it will start spawning the enemies. And in the last video, the mic was turned off somewhere in between, so sorry for that. And most of the time at the end, it was the coding part, so it won't matter much. But if you get any errors, try to fix it yourself. And if you have any problems with any of the part, you can comment below and I'll try to solve it for you. So we have our car and we have saved it as a prefab. And when we hit the scene and the game starts, we are able to move the car. So there's not any problem with anything. And we'll for the rigid body, let's change the prefab for the player. And for the constraints, it should move everywhere. And let's create a template for our enemy. So for the enemy, we are not going to change any other sprites. So we'll just use our police car sprite. So where the LMNOP, here is our police car. And as you can see, it's 256 by 256, and we'll rename it as enemy. And we'll save it as a prefab and we'll start editing the prefab. So let's delete the enemy, and for the player we'll position a little bit towards the bottom, so negative, or maybe we should place tap start a little bit downwards. Yep, that would be better. So for the game start UI and for the text, which is the text to start, let's position it to 256 downwards. So we should be able to see our car correctly. And let's start editing our enemy. So similarly, the enemy is going to have an up direction object, and it's going to position at 0, 1 and 0, which is going to be a direction of our enemy. And we'll have a couple of scripts attached to the enemy. The first script, not the first, there is only one script, and let's create it, which is the enemy script. And let's also create the tag for our enemy. So whenever the uh, player collides or the enemies collide with each other, we should be able to detect. So the first tag is the enemy, and the tags we are going to get from our constant script. And there are tags for the coins, coin, and that's for the bomb, and one more tag for the shield, and the last tag is for the magnet. So we have our enemy, we'll set up the tag as enemy, and we'll attach a box collider 2D component, which is going to similar what we have done before, 1.7, 1.7. And we'll add a rigid body 2D component to it. And after having the rigid body, does not matter whatever it is, we'll finally add the enemy component. And inside our enemy, for our player reference, we cannot attach it here because it's not child of any of our main objects, so it is a different prefab. So we'll get that from directly from the game manager, which we have created the instance. So the enemy script is going to be similar to the player script, but instead of getting the input from the manager or the movement manager, we are going to set up the input. We'll calculate the torque and likewise we'll set up the input. So let's go inside the scripting phase and let's see where we are. So for the enemy, mm, too much code. So we are inside the enemy script, and let's create the variables. So private float, and there will be move force, and it's not going to have anything changed. So we'll just use one variable. So there we needed the start force, and when we apply the force, the current force is going to change. So many things were needed, that's why we changed it. And after having the torque, we'll have the private float for the move start force, and private float for the move start, or let's just call it start torque. And after that, we'll have a serialized field for a private transform, and first one's for the direction object, and it doesn't matter if it's serialized field, we just need it to be private, but we are going to set it up from the game manager. And after that, we'll have a serialized field for an audio clip, and it's going to spawn our bomb clip. So whenever it gets explode, it's going to spawn from here. And then we'll have a private float for the input, which we are going to calculate as a cross product, then rigid body 2D RB private bool, and has game finished. So it's going to get the game finished content, FINIS. Game finished content whenever the game over event is called, and the private spawn manager, and let's just call it spawn manager, and the public bool can destroy. We won't need that, but don't know. It was creating problems for player object is equals to game manager instance dot player. So we got the directly the player from the game manager, and there should not be any problems. Similarly, we'll set up the rigid body, and after we have done our rigid body, we'll set the has game finished to false, and spawn manager is equals to find object of type spawn manager. There's only one spawn manager in the game, so it won't matter. Can destroy, it's not needed. And after the awake, let's go inside our start, and we'll set the move start force to be 24F, and move force to be move start force. And similarly, start torque is going to be move start force multiply by 1200, and we'll divide by 24, and the torque is going to be the start torque, and we have the move start force and the start torque. Now on enable and on disable, we need to create our game over. So private void game over, and it's going to be dictionary which goes from string to object, and we'll just call it message. And here we are just going to check, not going to check, we'll just set has game finished to true, so it won't detect any collisions. And some random code doesn't get executed. So on enable, we'll go inside the event manager and we'll start listening to the constants dot event names dot game over. When the game is over, we are going to listen the game over event. And similarly, on disable, we are going to stop listening. So that was for the game over events. Now inside our update function, we are first going to check if the game has finished, then we'll just return, else the input is going to change. So we'll first get the temporary direction, which is our direction of the player, and I mean in which direction we need to rotate, and after that the move direction. This one is going to be the direction object dot position minus transform dot position, and we'll need to calculate the move direction again, or maybe we should just cache it. Nah, we'll calculate it afterwards. So the input is going to be v3 dot cross from temp direction dot normalized and move direction dot normalized. Move direction is always going to be 1 unit, and we'll set the z to it. And here we have the input. Now inside our fixed update, we are going to move the players or the enemy. So rb dot angular velocity, and the angular velocity is going to be rb dot angular velocity multiplied by 0.9895f. And after that, if the game is finished, then we'll just return. We don't need to have the velocity changed, and then we'll check the rb dot velocity, and we'll decrease the velocity by 0.99f. And let's get the move direction. So is everything working correctly? The mic is working. I'll need to check every time I record, so there should not be more problems. And the move direction, we are going to set the move direction to be the direction object dot position minus transform dot position. And similarly, as we did in the player, we'll apply a force in the move direction. So rb dot add force, and we are going to go in the move direction and we'll multiply by the move force. And if math have dot abs of input is greater than 0.05, then we'll do rb dot add torque, and we'll add the torque equal to input into time dot fixed delta time, and we need to multiply by the torque component, and we are going to have it rotate a little bit faster. And I think its velocity is not changing much. Okay, we'll change it afterwards inside our init function. And next we have our public void init. So it's going to initialize the position and the variables. So let's first do int and get a random index is going to be unity engine dot random dot range, and we'll get it from 0 till 4. So we'll get 4 values, and v3 temp offset direction, and inside our switch cases we are going to set the direction. So uh, do we need to do the switch case? So temp offset direction is going to, if random index is 0, then we'll do up. Okay, so it should be more than enough. So if the random index is 0, we should do up, and up, down, left, right. Hmm. Okay. 0, -90. Then random index is equals to 1. Then we'll do right. Should we move clockwise or counterclockwise? If we rotate it by 90 degrees, yep, there should be more than enough. Then if random index is equals to 2, then we'll use down. V3 dot down. Let's just use the switch. It's going to be, so let's do a switch on the random index, and we'll do case 0, break, case 1, then break, case 2, break, and then break. And for the case 0, temp offset direction is equals to new vector 3, and we are going in the up direction, and we'll copy paste it multiple times. And for the right, we are going in the right direction. This one is the bottom direction, and the last one is the left direction, so which is the -1. And after having let's just set it to 0, so if it was something else, and we'll set the transform dot position to be uh, player object dot position, and we'll add temporary offset direction multiplied by 18f. So it's going to be spawned somewhere, and after we'll rotate, and let's do a new vector 3, 0, 0, and random index multiply by 90f plus 180. So we are moving in the opposite direction, so that's why we are adding 180, and we'll multiply the move force multiply equal to random dot range from 0.8f to 1.2f. So it's set up the velocity to be random, and we have already created the game over. And next we'll need, for now, let's see how the enemies are going to spawn, and we'll initialize them, so there should not be problems. And we'll go inside the spawn manager, which is going to spawn the enemies and all the different things we'll need. So for this spawn manager, SCSP sound, and we have our spawn manager. So let's create a serialized field and private game object, and the first game object we are going to need is for the coin prefab, and next we have the enemy prefab. And do we need any other? No, for now, let's not. And we'll have a serialized field, private list of game object, and this one is going to be for the power ups. And we'll create it just now, and we'll use it later. And there is a public list of game object, which is the temporary enemies container. It needs to be hidden inspector, so it's going to store the enemies which we have already. You'll get it later how we are going to use it. And let's add the on enable and on disable event. And let's start the private void, and let's use the start spawning. And inside our start spawning, it's going to be called from an event, so we'll need a dictionary from string to object, and we'll just call it message. And inside our start spawning, we are going to spawn enemy and the power up. So let's create a method for private void spawn enemy, and it doesn't take any parameters, so we are just going to use where enemy is equals to instantiate, and we'll instantiate the enemy prefab which we have created. And we'll just use enemy dot init. So it should, instead of a game object, mm, 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 enemy dot get component enemy dot init. So it's going to create our enemy, and we'll just use invoke repeating. And the method we are going to use is the spawn enemy. Time is going to be 0f, and the repeat rate we are going to set from random dot range from 1.5 to 3.5f. And the spawn enemy is set up, and we also need on the game over stop spawning. So let's just copy this, and instead of start we'll call stop, and instead of invoke repeating we'll use cancel invoke, and doesn't need the additional parameters, so they should start spawning our enemies. And we'll need an enemy prefab, and we'll need to attach this event manager dot start listening, and we are going to listen to the constants dot event names dot game start and start spawning. We'll copy this code again, and instead of start listening we'll attach the stop listening, and we'll copy the code again, and we'll do stop spawning, and it's when the game over is called. And in the so we have almost created the enemy spawner, and we also need the where it is private void, we have our spawn enemy. We'll need a private void spawn power up, And similarly, we are going to call the invoke repeating, and what we are going to use is spawn power up and starts from the 5th second whenever it is called, and the repeat time is going to be 10 seconds. And the spawn power up will set a couple of parameters, but it's almost going to be easier. And let's set it up. So first we'll get the power up, and it's going to be power ups and random dot random unity engine dot random dot range, and we'll go from 0 to power ups dot count, and this should give us a temporary power up. And here, instead of using random, we'll use unity engine dot random. And after we have our temporary power up setup, uh, let's create, and we already did it. Let's go inside the enemy script, and we'll get this random. We'll just copy the whole thing and we'll see what we won't need it. So we have the random index, temporary offset direction, and let's delete this all. So we are setting the temporary offset direction, and we have the random index. Now after that, what we need to do is multiply the temporary offset direction by 10, and temporary offset direction will add game manager instance player transform position. So it will offset, first it will multiply the temporary offset direction by a factor of 10, and then it will destroy our, not destroy, it will offset by the player. And we are going to instantiate the power up at the temporary offset direction at the quaternion dot identity, and we'll destroy the power up after 10 seconds. So it automatically destroys itself. And similarly, inside our cancel invoke, we are going to call our spawn power up. So whenever the game start function is called, it should start spawning our enemies, and our enemies are almost set up. And we also need to create our power ups, so we'll start creating it. So as you can see, instead of referencing directly from the game manager, or to have create a custom unity event, we are directly using the event manager, and when the game start event is called, it's going to start spawning. So system dot collections dot generic, let's delete the code we are not going to use. We'll add any code we'll need afterwards. Systems dot collections dot generic, and if we go inside unity, let's set up the parameters. So what we did was, inside our score manager, we have the coin prefab and the enemy prefab, and for the power ups we are going to have three more scenes, three more game objects which will create it later. But for the enemy, we have the enemy prefab, and let's go inside our enemy. So the direction object, we need to set it up, and the player object, we are not having as serialized field. The bomb clip, we need to also have to set it up, which is our explosion clip. And there is nothing much more, but whenever it gets spawned, there should not much be problems. Spawn manager has all this three, and the event is also correct. Now let's create our power-ups first. So the first power-up we are going to create is a magnet. So we'll just call it as a magnet. And it's, as you can see, it's pretty much tiny. We'll increase the scale by 2 cross 2, add a circle collider to it, and increase the radius to 4. Nah, it does not increase 5. Let's just increase the radius to 1. No, 0.5. So this is our power up. So we'll save this power up as a magnet, and its circle collider, it needs to be set as trigger. So delete it from the scene, and let's duplicate this magnet. And the other power up we are going to have is the bomb power up. So we'll just set its tag as the bomb, and for the magnet we need to tag as the magnet. And for the bomb, if we change the sprite to the bomb sprite, it's going to be have the property of the bomb. Now after we have a bomb, the last sprite we are going to need is the shield sprite, shield power up. And for this power up we are going to use our shield, which is this yellow one. And for the tag we'll use the shield tag, and inside our spawn manager will attach all three of our power ups. So we'll attach the magnet and we'll attach shield. So now if we hit play, uh, the variable player object of enemy has not been assigned. So enemy and the player object inside the awake. Okay, we need to set this up inside the start, because the game manager instance is everything is called inside the awake, so it will create some problems. Or maybe we should set it up in the init, and the variable again, as you can see, let's just set it up. So update not as game finished, as game finished is equals to false, move force start, and spawn manager. So do we have the spawn manager? Let's see. Are we? Yep, we are inside Unity, and there are going to be lots of problems. So let's go and let's hit play. The variable player, okay, so the player itself was not assigned, so it was showing problems. So inside our game manager we don't have the player attached, so that's why it was showing problems. So now if we hit play, when the game start event is triggered, as you can see, there's a problem with our cars because they are not following us. So maybe the has game finished is set to true at the start, but it is set to false. Okay, inside the update, if the game has finished, that was a problem with the update. So instead of has game finished, I set it up to not as game finished, and now we should be able to see the enemies start moving towards our players. So spawn an enemy. So as you can see, there's this enemy, it's moving somewhere, and I think the rotation should be inside the negative direction. So where we do the add torque, we'll use the negative, because it was moving in the straight direction, but when it was in the opposite direction it was changing its direction. So yeah, Now as you can see, it's following us, and the next thing we are going to do is whenever our player collides with the enemy, we are going to trigger the game over event, and when the game starts, we'll start calculating the score and have it update. And also when the enemy collides with each other, we are going to destroy them. And in the next video we are going to create the score manager. I mean, we have already created it, but all the complex score functionalities we are going to create it afterwards. So what we need to do, uh, for the spawn manager, let's create the final script, which is for spawning the coins. And no, we'll do it afterwards. So when our player, yeah, let's start editing our player script. Sound manager, score manager, and here's our player script. So we should have all our variables set up, which is the move start force, start sprite, and everything's also set up inside our awake and on enable. Now let's set it up in our on collision enter. So on collision enter 2D, the first thing we are going to check if collision dot collider dot compare tag, and we are going to compare the tag with the enemy. Constants dot tags dot enemy. Then what we'll do, so we'll first check if we are inside the revenge mode. Then the condition is going to be different, and here we'll, for now we'll just return else. What we are going to check if first the shield is on, and if the shield is on, that means it does not need to record this collision. And if it is not, then we'll decrease the current health. And if the current health is 0, then we'll call the game over function. So game manager dot instance dot game over. Can move will be set to false, and after that we'll destroy the game object after 2 seconds. And we are going to trigger the did we create the game over in the game manager? Start game, open game? No, it is not created. So let's create that function inside our game manager later, but I'll just call it from here. So game manager dot instance dot game over. So that is the only condition in which the game is supposed to be over. And we are going to do event manager dot trigger event and constants dot event names dot update score, update coin, update item, update health. The health is going to change, and for the value we are going to pass the string name is going to be constants dot score message dot amount, and the amount we are going to pass is the current health. So whoever is subscribed to this event will have its health checked, and if it is greater than 0, then else? If it is not greater than 0, then we'll start the current whatever it is. So this is going to trigger the game over event. Now inside our game manager, let's create our game over event. And it's always good to create all the scripts from the start. So we have our start awake. Yep. Uh, so let's create the game over event. So it's going to be public. So when the game is finished, the first thing we are going to do is game active UI dot set active to false and input panel dot set active to false, and afterwards the start button, maybe you don't need it, and game and UI dot set active to true. And then we are going to trigger the game over event. So event manager dot trigger event constants dot event names dot game over, and the parameter we are going to pass is null, and we are also going to pass the update item event. So the current items will be updated, which are the you'll see it afterwards. So let's see. And inside the start game event, we are already triggering the game start event, and end panel will need to attach the objects. So let's see. This will use afterwards. And let's go inside our starts. 1, 2, 3, 6, 7. Has game started to fall? Start button, game active, game end, pause, input. And inside the game over event, open pause panel, close pause panel, go to main menu, restart the game. And let's also add the add coins. So public void add coins. And whenever we add the coins, it's just going to set the player prefs dot setint and constants dot data dot coin, and we'll set it to 10,000. So it will give 10,000, and event manager dot trigger event, and we are going to trigger the refresh the number of coins wherever it is referencing it. Event names dot refresh coin, and parameter we are going to pass is the null. And similarly, after add coins, we'll also add a function for the add score, and here we'll add one more 0, and for the type we are going to add score, and the event it is going to be the refresh score, and similarly the parameter we are going to pass is the null. And the open and the close store, yep, let's also set it. So the first one is the public void open store, and inside this function we are just going to set the store panel dot set active to true, and the next function is the public void close store, and here we'll do just store panel dot set active to false. So we are just setting up our game and UI, and afterwards we'll need to create the system dot serializable class, which yep, it'll be needed. So public struct, and it's going to be upgrade data, And inside our upgrade data, we are going to have public string type, public int level, public int cost, and the public float value. So this is going to store the timers or the values of forces for different levels. And after we have created this, whenever the endgame function is called, we were inside our enemy script, so it should be able to call the endgame function. And this one's also 45 minutes long. And let's see, there should be some problems with the game manager. Nope, there aren't. Store panel, we already attached the store. Let's hit play. And when the game finishes, so let's try to collide with one of the cars. Let's collide. Just collide, buddy. So as you can see, we are not getting any input. Our enemies are still there. We are not going to do anything. Our buttons are also there. We need to remove that temporary button we created. And after that, we need to let's add the score component, and we'll add the home and the restart button component also. So let's go inside. Okay, I was not inside Unity. So as you can see, when we collide with any of the cars, it's going to show our end panel. And now we should be able to collide, and we are able to see the end panels, and we'll attach all of our objects. So let's show the game end UI. And for our game end UI, we'll add all the functionalities. So for the go to main menu button, we'll attach the go to menu. Rate and achievement doesn't have anything. The store, we are going to attach the open store. Open store. And close doesn't have still. Restart, we are going to attach the restart game function. And add coins, we are going to attach the add coins function. Add coins. And total score, add score, will attach the add score function. Game manager, where is our add score? So for now we are just using the local setup, and we also not set up the score manager. So let's do a simple score increase trick. So whenever the game start function is called, it's going to start counting a timer, and our score manager should be pretty much so let's see what's remaining in our different scripts. So the camera follow is perfectly set up. There's no need for constants. And in the enemy, whenever we collide with each other, we'll need to update the score, which will create it afterwards, or maybe we should do it in the next video. So in the next video, after we have created this enemy, we are going to use different like misses and collisions to update the scores. So let's just end it for this video, and we'll start creating score in the next video. So if you guys have watched till now, thank you guys for watching. And I'm new to recording videos and stuff, so it's already been 4 or 5 months, but the settings are pretty much overwhelming because I'm learning game development, and there's already enough time, but I'm not spending enough time to understanding the recording software. So if there are any problems, to comment it below. I'll try to fix it up. And if you watched till now, thank you guys for watching, and see you guys in the next video.